Welcome to the Changemaker's Corner, powered by Fuel, an interview series spotlighting different grassroots leaders, social impact innovators, and young changemakers across Toronto and the GTA. At Changemaker's Corner, we pull back the curtain on changemaking work, shine a light on the realities of the social impact sector, and reimagine a better future for meaningful and authentic change in our communities. Learn more about Fuel at fuelchange.org and on social media at Fueling Changemakers Corner, with a special episode with my friend, none other than Alicia Richins, climate justice advocate, sustainable impact strategist, and the creator of the Climateverse. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. How was your day? How was your day today?
My day was a little meh. Like I had a rough night, so then I had to have a slow start. But then we got some things done, and I'm excited to, have this little adventure across town to come into the studio to talk with you today.
Thank you for making the trek. I really appreciate it. So I guess, who are you? How do you introduce yourself? Who are you? Your passion, your vocation, what you do. I kind of just want to get all that out right now.
Yeah, working on that elevator pitch. So hi, I'm Alicia. I'm the founder of the Climateverse, which is a transformation lab and creative studio focused on radically imagining and co-creating climate just futures. So basically we work with mission-driven organizations using strategic visioning, which is a mix of your typical strategic planning, but powered with futures and foresight, and always undergirded by climate justice. And we also do storytelling projects and community storytelling events that I'm excited to get more deep into with folks, right? But it's the revenue part, right? The corporate side has to help to fuel the community work that we do. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. I live here in Toronto, originally from Trinidad and Tobago. Hopefully you still hear that in the accent. My brothers tease me all the time that you can't.
You
but
can.
here we are, right? Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. I'm really excited. I've been really looking forward to have this conversation with you. Just of all the amazing work you do and also being part of the Fuel community. I've been really excited. So let's get right into it. I mean, I will ask you some questions about the work you do. That information is also out there though. So I also want to get to know a little bit more about you and kind of with these, a little bit more these deeper, more personal themes that we talk about at Fuel, and your connection with that. So not just about the work you do, but beyond that. So let's start with something really chill. What are some of your interests, hobbies beyond the work that you do? What else do you do, besides that?
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind is sci-fi. I love to read. Honestly, I'm trying to separate this from work, but I have this personal ambition to be a climate fiction writer. And so I love to read a lot of sci-fi, fantasy. There's a really cool niche of Caribbean sci-fi fantasy that I love. I really love to go out dancing. Salsa is my absolute favorite. Okay. I'm down for a soca party, but yeah, I love to head out to Lula for salsa dancing.
Lula?
Yeah, Lula Lounge.
I love that.
There's
place.
live 12-piece live band on Friday night. Nothing beats that.
Okay. How long have you been dancing salsa?
Oh, I've been dancing salsa for a long time. I feel like I first learned the basic steps in high school, and then in undergrad, I did a summer internship in El Salvador, and that's when we started going out every Friday. And when I got back to Toronto, I was like, okay, I need to find my spot to do this more now.
I did salsa too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. My dad was a salsa teacher, so I grew up doing a little bit of salsa, bachata, and
merengue. It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, cool. I love Lula Lounge too. It's a great place. Okay, well, I guess let's start. I have going to move a little chronologically here. So I kind of want to start from the beginning. If you were asked, what is your origin story? How do you answer that? What is your origin story?
Yeah, so I grew up in Trinidad, but I have this really unique experience of having been born here and raised there. And so I always had this kind of vague image or question, I should say, in my mind of what is this other side, this Canada thing, this big country I knew about the Mounties and maple syrup and hockey, but not much more else. And what that really did for me though was heighten my curiosity about how life happens or how people experience life around the world and the differences that we face in growing up. And so also my father was a pilot, or is a pilot, I should say. And so I was really privileged to travel a lot. And so I would say like all of that just really culminated in a child who was very curious about the world, quite knowledgeable about, the difference of opportunity and experience, and really determined to make it better. I just remember as a kid telling my parents all the time, complaining from everything from like the chores to political stuff, like this is not fair. And they would always say, well, you need to, go to school, get good grades, get a good job, and you'll change the world. And I think I took them more seriously than they ever anticipated.
I think it was great advice, though. I think,
Yeah.
and oftentimes they say about change-making work, that oftentimes for a lot of change makers, what they get into, the work they get into, stems from kind of like personal experiences and things they've seen when they were younger, and how it's like shaped the world around them and changed the trajectory of their life. Would you say that's kind of like the same thing for you?
Yeah, and to a certain extent, yes. I would say there was definitely a lot of exploration and growth in my like later teen years and early 20s. But even now, as I come into the work of the Climateverse, especially from this more creative side, it's definitely like a full circle moment, because I was the creative child, like not just like writing, but I was in all the clubs. I've been playing the violin since I was 5 years old, pan, ballet, jazz, tap dancing, piano, guitar, like all the things. Teachers would pull me out of class to go to practice because we had some competition coming up.
Oh my gosh.
I was Little Miss Everything.
And I could see how like the creativity and art plays a huge part in the work you do now.
Yeah.
And I also kind of see how it's hard to decipher the difference, And do you feel like you need to sometimes, or do you think that those two things are always like
like the work and the creativity?
Exactly. Yeah. Like, like your
Yeah.
curiosity and your love for art, but also the work you do specifically with Climateverse, also as a consultant. Like, I feel like there's non-creative parts maybe in the work you do too. So do you feel like you need to decipher those things, or they kind of belong together in a way?
I think they do ultimately belong together, but I came to it from a more separated place. Like, I would say, like, trying to decide what to study in university and my career, I would just hear my father's voice always, like, you need to do something, like, practical, you need to, like, make money, like, I wanted to study violin performance, and he was like, hell no, And so I ended up in economics, and, it's just been this very kind of winding journey to get to this place where now I feel like, yeah, like, hell yeah, I need both. I can't deny that other side. I definitely felt that for a long time, that I was denying a side of me.
You speak a lot about your dreams of being like a science fiction author, and like how, and obviously I could see based on the work you do now, how that's connected. Do you ever feel like sometimes the work you do and your dreams like they clash? Do you feel like sometimes the work takes you away from the more fulfilling parts? Or again, like, and how do you, I guess, mediate with that? How do you,
Yeah, I would say in an ideal world, they don't. Like, it's such a natural extension. But in the real world, the clash I feel is more like you were talking about, like the time and energy of just like, yeah, like I want to publish more short stories, like longer form short stories, and maybe even a novel at some point. But like, carving out that time and figuring out what resources they are to kind of help you build that up is really hard in the way that things operate now. So yeah, I'm still very much in the early stages of figuring out that journey.
And I feel sometimes I feel like that pressure obviously could be internal. It could be like you feeling you have like a time and energy is like a finite resource, and you only have a certain amount to give to certain things. But also I do think that there's an external pressure, the idea that a lot of what you do has like an urgency to it. And I feel like maybe that's not intentional, but when I watch some of the episodes you do or the articles that you do, there's a level of urgency because it is commentary on the world that's going on right now. And so do you feel like that's hard to deal with sometimes, like seeing a world that is essentially broken in many ways, and the will to want to fix it, but also understanding that you yourself need time to let,
Yeah, I think that's like a central tension to hold, right? Because yes, climate change is very urgent. We need to make big changes yesterday. But at the same time, we're humans. And so we operate in these human systems, and we can only move as fast as we build trust with each other to make those changes. And there's always so much that we can save, even as we see certain things kind of dying or shifting. Like it was really, really warm yesterday in November in Toronto. That's crazy. So yeah, that definitely shows up for me in terms of how do I kind of internalize my own climate anxiety and pushing into workaholism to try to be like, well, I need to do this, you know, like this is really important. I need to like burn the candle at both ends, but at the same time, like I'm a human, you know, like I'm not a machine. And so really finding that balance of like, yes, it's urgent and I can do the best that I can. I need to focus on what I can control, but I also need to be taking care of myself at all times because, you know, we never have to earn rest, right? I have to be rested enough to show up for the work. I have to be connected enough to show up for the work. And so, yeah, that's definitely an ongoing journey. I think I'm gradually getting better though.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have such a beautiful vocabulary around it, so I think that's a good start, at least, you know?
Lots of therapy and books.
Okay, all right, good. All right, keep that in mind for the community. So, okay, I mean, this is a good segue to my next question, is like burning the candle at both ends, like burning out, you know? And I always say this thing where if you are burning the candle at both ends, it makes sense that you would burn out twice as fast.
Yeah.
And so, have you dealt with that? How have you mitigated burnout in the work that you do? And I'm really curious. I feel like you have talked about this a little bit in your other interviews, but I'm really curious, you know, like the vulnerable aspect of like loving the work you do, being so fulfilled by it, but at the same time, it taking so much from you. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I feel like the times that I've experienced burnout were more so when I was working in like a typical 9-to-5 job where you're like coming up against these external boundaries and people can speak to values but not really embody them, and having, especially like in the nonprofit sector, you have like just these gargantuan work portfolios and tasks and projects to manage. And so learning how to set boundaries with that, I guess like I've taken my learnings from there into my work now as a creative entrepreneur to really say like, no, like we need to, like I can't be working on 5 different big projects at once, right? We need to focus things down, prioritize, you know, we'll make notes of other dreams we have. And when the time comes, you know, we'll make that happen and find the resources, but really paring things down, learning to prioritize. And like I said about like self-care, I think routine is really big. I'm obviously very privileged that I can design my own routine as a creative entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And so figuring out what is the routine, not really focused on productive output, but the routine that really takes care of me, right? Like I need to have like a slow morning. I need to carve out time to go out for a walk every day. I need to check in with like a friend or one of my siblings for a phone call, especially as someone who lives by herself in a basement apartment in Toronto. You know, so just really making the time for the things that I know that I need amidst all of the work. You know, there's always going to be more work. Like the work's never going to magically be like, all right, done, you can retire now.
Yeah.
There's always going to be more work. So just really starting to embody that and focusing on myself as like a human, I don't want to say animal, but like this part of nature. You know, we have these cycles. I'm not, like I was saying, I'm not a machine, I'm not a robot. And so I need to stop treating myself like one.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's so, and thank you for saying that, because I find like a lot of people who work in this space who talk about things like burnout and like, you know, working in this like hyper capitalist city and nonprofit and the sustainability behind that. I feel like a lot of them are like, I always make this reference, but like doctors who smoke cigarettes. You know, it's just like, we know what the work that we do is important. We know it's important to say these things, but we spend so much effort and like time to do that we don't always have, you know, the space to practice that for ourselves.
Yeah, that's such a great way of framing it. You know, I just think as a big sister, I'm the eldest daughter. It's just like I need to lead by example. So I can't be like telling people to do something if I'm not working on it myself.
Exactly. That's why you mentioned like prioritizing, but also making lists of dreams outside of the work that you do that you will eventually get to. Those are really helpful things. And do you say that often? Do you talk about burnout a lot in your job? And it came out very natural. So I was just wanting to know if you've said these things before.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely talk, especially when I'm talking to like youth in the climate space about that. That definitely comes up a lot. Like, how do we kind of hold the urgency of this work, this field that we're working in, with the fact that we're only human and we can't, you know, this whole thing isn't just on our shoulders. There are 8 billion people on the planet. At least 1 million of them are also working on this thing, right?
At least. At least.
Probably a lot more.
Yeah, hopefully.
And so if you need to take a day off, it's okay. If you need to cut back on hours, it's okay.
If you need to take a day off, it's okay.
Yeah.
Can everyone just remember that for themselves? Okay, all right. Everyone there watching? Okay, all right. So you mentioned rituals that you know, kind of like that are connected to your wellness and practicing, setting boundaries and having a healthy kind of workflow. So do you have any other ones? You mentioned going for walks, calls, slow mornings, any other kind of like rituals or ceremonies that you have to practice that?
I feel like those are the big ones. Connected to slow mornings, though, something that I had learned from my therapist a few years ago was like, if you're like trying to be up in the morning by a certain time and alert and awake, what we need to prioritize isn't so much like I need to be awake at this time, so much as I need to get X number of hours of sleep. And so we work backwards to be like, actually, maybe I don't need a wake up alarm. I need a bedtime alarm to say like, this is the time I need to go to sleep in order to honor all of the things I need for the rest of the day. I don't necessarily have that alarm on right now, but it's definitely part of, I guess the biggest part of having a good morning routine is your nighttime routine. So like, turning down, for nights, cutting screen time, trying to get to bed by a certain hour. I feel like you're like night owl nodding at me like,
I'm trying to also practice the same thing.
Yeah, but we all have different like proclivities, right? Like it's fine if you're like a night owl. You just figure out the routine that works for you. I feel like I'm more of like a late morning, early afternoon. That's when I peak. That's when like I'm the most like productive. And creative. And so it's good to have like a morning to just to have some time for myself before I deal with the world.
I am a night owl, but at the same time, like I also spend a lot of that time like just lying down, being incredibly anxious about the state of the world, and that takes me a long time to fall asleep. So I think that there is still like things I can practice better in terms of like learning how to when to turn off screens or not getting such a wave of information right before you go to bed and getting better at that practice. So thanks for
and
talking
things
about
like sunlight and exercise are really good for like your body's own circadian rhythm. It's like, okay, we exerted ourselves, we got some sun, and now your brain is going to naturally start to wind down when you need it to. And melatonin is always helpful.
Yeah. Such great information here, okay? So make sure you're not
a doctor, but
no, but it works for you,
yeah,
and
definitely.
I think that's so important. Okay, I'm going to take it to a different direction a little bit. In one of your interviews, you talk. So you're talking about kind of holding two things. You're talking about the work that you do as a consultant, the work that you do that makes income, and the passion work you do, like the Climateverse, and having to carry those two things at once, and also like blending them together to see if that one can help the other. And I love the thing you said. You were like, you said kill two birds with one stone, but then you rephrased it to be feed two birds with one dish, which I really appreciate.
I really tried to like move away from militaristic, like all of these war analogies that we're so used to using. It's like, stop being so violent. We need to kill birds.
I totally agreed, because I was gonna do it too naturally. I was just like, I love your passion, how you like have this like machine gun approach to talking about what you're doing. I'm like, wait, hold on. Like there's a lot of other things that fire at like great rates that aren't weapons. So I totally agree. But I guess on that like topic, like what are some of the struggles that you have faced in having to carry those two things, and even just like financially like sustaining the Climateverse and just the work you do broadly?
Yeah, so it's definitely been a journey, because I was already kind of doing consulting on the side of my like 9 to 5. And so when I left that work about a year and a half ago and I committed to doing this thing full time, I was kind of still in the early stages of figuring out this Climateverse thing. And I remember I was working with a coach at the time and started to really unpack how much I really wanted the Climateverse to be like a bigger part of it, but I couldn't figure out how that would like generate income. And so just it was definitely a struggle of balancing time and energy for, what are the things that are actually paying the bills versus this fun thing that I do. And I was really fortunate to have found out about this fellowship. It's the Next Gen Foresight Practitioners Fellowship. A friend who I really look up to was, in the previous cohort. And when I saw the applications open, I was kind of just reading through the website and learning about this whole new field of futures and foresight. And that's when I kind of learned like, hey, in the Climateverse storytelling thing that I'm doing here, this is a practice of futuring, right? These are images of the future that I'm presenting. And so maybe I should apply to this fellowship, and that would give me some grounding. And that's literally what's happened. I've gotten to do some training in futures and foresight. And the training is typically from the perspective of like consulting with corporations or like working in a corporate environment. like many things in the world. That's a field that was started by like Shell, and so we have these tools and methods, and it's less about like where did it come from, but more about like how do we use it to build towards, collective liberation and climate action and all these things that we care about. But yeah, I'm digressing. So like I got the training through the fellowship, and that's when it first kind of started to occur to me, like not just as the Climateverse work that I'm doing futuring, even working in sustainability and climate justice is a practice in futuring, right? It's about some particular kind of future that I'm trying to do my part to get us to, and to help different communities and organizations get to as well. And so this year has really been that year of weaving the two together. In fact, I literally just announced on LinkedIn this week that, the Climateverse is no longer just like the storytelling project, it's the whole thing. That's how I introduced it, as like the Transformation Lab and Creative Studio. And so all of my consulting is in the Climateverse, as well as the storytelling, which is now rebranded to the Dispatch from Other Dimensions. And so just thinking of it from a social enterprise model myself as a singular human, where, it's very much similar to how I was operating before, in the sense that the consulting needs to kind of fund the creative side. But now, instead of feeling like I'm building two businesses or working in these two disparate things, I can see more how they're connected, and how the creative things that I can bring into corporate spaces or nonprofit spaces can really feed that evolution to get everybody on board towards building a Climateverse. Yeah.
I love that, and I was very, very happy to hear that, because again, like I think in some of your past interviews, the way you would talk about both of those practices were like, I saw the kind of like, are they the same thing? Are they separate? And I think you were doing that work internally too,
Exactly.
like figuring out how that worked. And I think I love
Exactly.
how you're at this place now where the Climateverse is this overarching thing. It's like it's everything. It's an entire universe, and all the work I do fits under that.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
a multiverse. But
it's
yes.
it's a multiverse.
It's a pluriverse.
Exactly. Yeah. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I love it, and I think it's good, because that was so much of what I got from Climateverse was the combination of like there being true social impact commentary, and there being such a creative kind of like entertaining aspect to it.
Yeah.
So, and I think those things could belong together. They should be together. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and then eventually they weave into a situation where I can just like take 6 months and write a novel one
Exactly.
day,
Exactly.
So
It all
hopefully we get
funnels
there.
into a bag of cash that allows you to take a break and write your novel. I really hope that you do too, because again, watching a lot of your stories, Alicia, like they're so great. They're amazing. They're imaginative. They're playful, which goes to my next question. So at Fuel, one of the things that we are really trying to bring back into the social impact space and is the idea of play. And I think oftentimes we, like our people in our line of work are burnt out, and a lot of that is because there's such a intrinsic like relationship between social impact and just like labor. And so I think play is a great thing to do to kind of bring back imagination and creativity. So how does play fit in your work?
Yeah, I love that question. In terms of figuring out that balance of like I don't even want to say technical, because I don't even think my work is all that technical, but figuring out like the consulting side versus the creative side, what's really helped is treating the creative side as play, instead of trying to face the creative work like if it's just another like big consulting task. Like I have to get this perfect story done, and it has to be done. And, it's like, what if I just like played with it? What if this was just for fun? Obviously there's an audience that I'm hoping will enjoy and consume it at the end of the day, but really treating it as a playful thing has been really fun and important. And that's kind of why I still struggle with that balance of like personal life versus work life, because it's like, I'm still playing, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm talking about climate and I want to write a book, but like I'm also reading these sci-fi books. Like it's all just like weaving this playground. And it's about figuring out those boundaries of like, what do I need as a human to make sure that the play is really play, and I know when, the play is starting to turn into work. But yeah, that boundary is definitely a little blurry for me sometimes.
I hear you. And I think there's like a pressure a lot of the time where people who are like, that's work, like this is, like your personal life. But for some people who do things that are like vocations, things that are like we get fulfillment from in many different ways, that line is often blurred. And I think that like sometimes it won't be like the idea is not to draw the line in the sand, but rather how can we just carry all of these things in the healthiest way, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And it does so much seem like Climateverse. It does seem so much like a sandbox. Like it's so.
Yeah,
And when
like I
watch
literally
you,
wanted to describe it as a play space, but in my mentor was like, I don't know, you're gonna confuse people when you call it a play space. I'm like, fine, I'll call it a creative studio.
yeah. It does seem that way though. Like when
Yeah.
you're telling stories, it feels like you are in this sandbox, just like reimagining, different lines of different timelines, and it's like a really cool thing. Okay, I have a couple more questions for you. On that note, I think with play and I think that with the Climateverse, there's a lot of like hope that you bring in, but also kind of like obviously a direct commentary to what's happening in the world. And you bring the story up in one of your other interviews where you talk about, I think it was the trucking kind of convoys, and like there was some sort of like indigenous. And you probably do a great job of explaining it better than me. But then you kind of switched roles, and to me, I mean, I loved it immediately. I was just like, yes, like that's so great. But I think, it's also, I think sometimes a worry for some people to talk about these topics that are taboo or that may seem like there's a lot of stigma behind them. Do you feel scared? Do you feel fear when you talk about these, very, I guess, and some people can perceive them as inflammatory, like situations happening in reality? And then like, what does it feel like to have commentary on those things, and putting yourself at the forefront of that,
Yeah, do I feel scared? I mean, maybe sometimes, not that often, because I'm just like, I'm just this little girl with a little platform. Like, who's really paying attention to be that scared? There are definitely some topics that I do feel scared about. And if there's ever like a story that I post that's like outside of the timeline of what something is happening, is because I hesitated, because I was like, oof. Like, I don't know, like, is this too touchy? I also worry about being perceived as fake news, because that's not the intention either. So it's definitely a fine line to manage. But, the example you brought up was actually the very beginnings of the Climateverse. Like, because that was a real, a week back in January 2022 where, you heard about the so-called Freedom Convoy, and RCMP feds, like, no problem, do your thing, drive across the whole country and wreak havoc in the capital. Meanwhile, the Wet'suwet'en land defenders were being, torn off their land, dragged, arrested, charged. And I was just like, I wish I lived in a parallel dimension where these stories were reversed. And I was like, maybe I should write that down. And I was like, well, maybe somebody wants to hear it too. And that's really how the Climateverse got started. So yeah, I would say sometimes I do get scared. I try to remind myself that, this isn't some large media platform like the CBC. I work to make it really clear that it's not just about like fake news. It's like always tying something to action. And so a lot of my stories, I'll profile like a local organization that's actually doing the work to make the story real, to kind of give people an example of what they could be doing to get there, to make it real, and, really highlighting like this is a Climateverse, we've left Earth, just really underscoring that point has been really cool. But then sometimes it's super satisfying too, right? So like last year there was a story about the Greenbelt scandal, and in the Climateverse, the premier rescinded the scandal, the housing minister resigned, and then 2 weeks later it happened in real life. And I was like, see, it's not that crazy.
Yeah, and that feels good, huh?
Yeah.
It should. And I think like sometimes, in hope, like driven and hope-based work, oftentimes our culture could maybe see something as tone deaf or, like not truly accepting the realities of the situation. And I think you could do both things at once. You could understand the current landscape, but at the same time, offer something different and encourage people to look at things different. And it seems like you're more and more comfortable doing that.
Somewhat. I think the last couple months have been pretty hard, coming through hurricane after hurricane. I have a lot of family in Florida and back in the Caribbean. Sorry, I just touched the mic. just really feeling, sometimes the real world events get really heavy, and I don't ever want to dishonor that natural feeling that people are having, to just be like, hey guys, I'm selling hope today. Hope to me is a lot more, it's a lot deeper than just feeling good. It's about like practicing. It's a discipline, as Mariam Kaba said. Hope is a discipline. Like, we have to earn our hope. We have to work for our hope. And so as much as I want to present, hopeful images of the future, it's always about inspiring people to take action. And yeah, it's definitely my own personal emotional journey to get comfortable sometimes when things are feeling really heavy outside.
Thank you for saying that. And I think it's so important to be said, because you are on the ground, you are doing the work. And so the hope that you're offering is so valuable and real and belongs in the same conversation as the imagination, as the play, as the hope, And yeah. I really love how you can carry both of those things at the same time in your work. I really do.
No matter how bad things get, there's still always so much that we can save, right? Like, there's still things worth, there's still a life worth living to be had. There's still art that needs to get made. Maybe we lose X number of species, but there's still all these other species that we still have to show up for. And so just kind of reminding ourselves, sometimes we can catastrophize. That's another word I learned in therapy.
That was catastrophize.
Yes, like everything is a catastrophe, and I'm never gonna get it done. It's perfectionism again. But like, even when things feel really heavy, there's always still something to save. Like, we'll always still be there. And it's also okay to take a rest. It's also okay to kind of honor our own, grieving processes and our emotions. But, rest, but don't completely disengage. Rest and come back to it. Connect with people. I think, as some creatives are really good at collaborations, and others of us, like myself, can be a little kind of like hermit solo in the wilderness, like the lonely wolf stereotype. And so I think really connecting with other creatives, like I talked about, like having phone calls with friends, it's usually creative friends who I need to talk to like get me out of my head, because they just kind of understand as well. And so yeah, those are just the ways that I work at keeping hope sustainable itself. Yeah.
Thank you. Couple more questions. And again, just thank you for being here and so vulnerable
pleasure.
and open. Again, I could listen to you talk for like ever. And it's a common cliche that we say in like interviews. I can listen to you, but I can truly like listen to you talk forever about what you do.
I went to an event in New York, funny enough, and it was a sci-fi writing event. Okay. And I volunteered to read one of the excerpts that the facilitator had put out. And multiple people after like, do you do reading? Like, I would love to like listen to you read. I'm like, is this a job? Like, where do I sign up for that?
Yeah, it totally is a job. I would love for you to read other people's stuff, but I particularly like your stuff and you saying those things. And because it's the passion is just so clearly there. And I think that's how you lead with your work, and like that in itself is a sustainable practice, is like always going with like this is work I believe in, and it's in your body and it comes out that way, and I really appreciate it. So you've spoke on pretty big panels. You were in New York for a conference. You've spoke a lot of different places. So another thing we talk a lot about in Fuel is imposter syndrome. So you've taken on this huge role of reimagining the future in terms of climate justice and all these other things. And do you ever experience that? Are you in ever certain environments where you feel imposter syndrome, where you feel like, and this might be a little bit of a vulnerable question, but I'm curious to know.
Sometimes, maybe. I think I've just come through this journey of understanding, like sometimes it ebbs and flows, honestly, but I do understand that I have expertise, I have knowledge, my ideas are valid and worthwhile, they deserve to be heard. Even like, especially as young people in the space, like I've really kind of leaned into advice from someone that, like even as young people, as youth, we have expertise as youth, and it should be valued as much as anything else. So like, yeah, sometimes I definitely get nervous and I'm worried that, I'm gonna sound like an idiot or like not know how to answer a particular question that comes up. But, I think it's okay to admit when I don't know the answer. Like, thank you for that question. I'm gonna look that up and get back to you, or direct you to somebody who might know the answer to the question. But yeah, just getting really comfortable in like, what is my message? What is like the core of what I always want people to take away from what I'm going to say? Really helps me feel confident. Like, this is, this is my niche, this is my lane, and I can show up anywhere and, shine in that space.
I love you. It sounds like you have a very healthy inner dialogue too, which I think is very necessary in the work that you do, is being able to tell yourself these things that you need to hear when someone else is not telling you.
Work in progress.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool. Well, at least the version you decided to bring to this
yeah.
interview is totally coming across that way. But thank you very much. Okay. So, dreams for the future of the Climateverse, the future of the world, the future for you. Like, what does that look like? How do you dream? What do your dreams look like on a day today?
Yeah, good question. Where to start with that? Well, the first thing, like, I feel like I talked a lot about the consulting side of the Climateverse, but even beyond just like the core, like, storytelling, I'm really keen to do a lot more like community engagement, like workshops and events. I'm currently in conversation with a couple other youth groups to do like a climate negotiation simulation with youth across the city who, can't really travel to Azerbaijan for COP29, but we can experience what it's like to like pretend to be a representative of a particular sector or country, and have to, play that negotiation. So just really embracing a lot more of those experiential, playful opportunities for the community. That's a really big goal for me for the next year. Carving out more time for writing. Like, I think I definitely sometimes have the image in my mind where it's like, I need to, take a year off or take 6 months if I'm ever going to write a novel. But so many people do it on the side of what they're doing already, right? And maybe it's not 500 words every day, maybe it's 100 words every day. I'm really leaning more into devotion over discipline. How can I just like show up for the stories in my head that want to get put out there? I feel like those are the biggest things: connecting with community, getting the stories out there, learning how to potentially grow a team, figuring out like resources to get there.
Which is tough as a lone wolf, right?
Yeah. I've worked through it though. I had some coaching with Erica this year that was so helpful. I had like a volunteer team through the summer and I learned a lot from that. I have one of them who's still kind of with me through it. So yeah, definitely learning and working on like what growth looks like, but I always want to be really kind of respectful of boundaries and like what is decent work and what am I asking people to do. So that's kind of where my hesitations come up. But a lot of the feedback I've gotten has been like, you're so generous. We did get to show up in the way that we needed to. Things felt abundant and honored. And so really trying to keep that energy. Yeah.
Yes. And I was going to say, like, I was going to ask, like, those, I see personal goals, I see personal dreams. I was like, what does the ideal dream landscape of the climate justice world look like? But I feel like you're doing that work. I feel like you are telling those stories of what that looks like. But maybe, do you have anything else other than what you've offered in your storytelling in that perfect world, in that kind of like ideal dream landscape of climate justice? What does that look like?
In the perfect world, I think I would inhabit a world where every individual started to really get into their own kind of personal transformation journey. Like, the more I delve into the world of futures, it's about like how am I preparing for the future that I'd like to see? And so I'm really interested in how do I help to prepare people for the future that we want? Like, we can articulate these visions, but are we really ready to live them, right? How do we start getting more comfortable with difficult conversations to actually get to a place where we can live up to our truth and reconciliation commitments, where we can actually achieve all the sustainable development goals, where we actually finally turn off the final oil pipeline,
but beyond the checked boxes, right? Like, really getting into what it looks like to make those changes.
Because we'll never check those boxes unless we do the work, right? We've had the solutions for years. Like, that's the whole point. We've had all of the solutions. We know exactly what we need to do, but we have this really big challenge with political will and entrenched systems, and we're only going to shift those systems happens when we start with ourselves. And so I'm really concerned with like, how do I do that myself? And then, you know, as I learn more, how do I like kind of help the journey of others, either in their personal lives or in their workplaces and their communities, you know, start to prepare for what's coming. Because, you know, even if we stopped all GHG emissions today, there's still like 1,000 meters of sea level rise over the next century, right? Like there's still impacts that are going to happen regardless of what happens. And so there's a balance of like preparing for what's coming, but doing as much as we can to like mitigate and, you know, not make it worse.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. Last few things. This is a little bit more like self-promotional maybe. Talk a little bit about your experience with fuel. How has that been with you? There are a lot of different things we do. We're very proud and honored for that you're a part of our community. What does that look like for you? How has that experience been being with Fuel in different ways?
Fuel has been great. I'm so glad you exist, honestly. I just remember like getting the first email through the CSI listserv of that first community dinner and being like, yeah, like that's exactly what we need. And I showed up and it was so cozy, and it's just been like that really warm, fuzzy vibes of connecting with folks. So I'm really excited to see more of that, more of the community dinners. I'm very excited for the scavenger hunt and distillery. Like, how do we like have this play as well? How do we build skills and, you know, attract resources? I'm gonna forget the name of the program, but the like finances, the
financial
funding,
series or
funding for social, what was the name of the program?
I think it was just called the financial series.
Yeah, the financial series. I really love like the whole frame of that. It was so valuable. So yeah, just looking forward to more of that programming. I mean, the wellness grant, like it's just really been phenomenal. The coaching with Erica again, like yeah, it's all really been phenomenal. I'm really grateful to be part of this community and excited to find opportunities to collaborate soon and to continue to fuel each other as we move forward.
Thank you for saying that, by the way. That was a testimonial person. That was when we no, but honestly, that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you in, not only because of the amazing work you do and how you talk about it, but also like just wanting to collaborate more with you. And so this is, I hope, just the start of many other kind of like things that we could do together. Last thing, and then we are done. You can look at that camera right over there. And any last words you'd like to leave, promotional things you like to promote, things you want to point people to, you can do it right over there in the camera.
Oh boy, no pressure. Hi there. You know, like no matter what it is that you're working on or what it is you're not working on, what field you're in, you have a role to play too in getting us to climate just futures. And there's a special role that only you can play. And I hope that you come out and play in it and live in it and, you know, come into the Climateverse and maybe we can help you find it. So yeah, check us out at the Climateverse everywhere. And I definitely look forward to connecting soon. We'll be launching our first zine soon, so look out for that.
Thank you so much, Alicia.
Thank you.
Thank you.